Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this work session. Sorry we're running a little behind today. We had a meeting with our state delegation, which actually started late and ran a little longer than we anticipated. So, first thing on the work session, though, we have the additional roof work for the Elizabeth Hager Center.
Good afternoon.
How are you today, Eric?
As I was writing this memo, I realized there's a number of things in this that we have two new council members that probably didn't know anything about the Elizabeth Hager Center, what it is, what an enterprise fund is, or what bond financing. And so I put some little blurbs in there for their benefit too. So this is probably a little longer than it needed to be, but a little background information. A couple of months ago, we bid out a project, which was roof work, which was on our operations center at Public Works, to replace that entire roof, and then a small section of roof here at the Elizabeth Hager Center. The Elizabeth Hager Center is at 14 North Potomac, and we have a number of tenants in there, including the Department of Labor License and Regulation, DCED, our offices, Department of Community and Economic Development's in there, and CVB, Convention and Visitors Bureau. So we have some tenants in that building that's right down the street. But there was 3 distinct roofs on that building, and the smallest section had the most obvious roof leaks and have been for a couple of years. That's why we replaced that. So we bid that out, competitively bid that out. The low contractors from Beltsville, Maryland, are called USA Construction Company. And there was a number of bidders. They were the low bidder by about $20,000, so we started to work with them. They're in the process of finishing those 2 roofs. During that process, I tried to get a budget number from them for the other 2 main roofs of Elizabeth Hager Center. And the more we looked, the more issues and problems we found. So this is a little unusual that our finance director says, yeah, let's go ahead and get a number and maybe we can just go ahead and move on it and give them a change order. Well, the work is about $120,000. So I can't move on that without mayor and council approval, hence the reason I'm coming here. So it's a little out of the ordinary of what we're doing without bidding it further. But what we're trying to do is move forward while the weather's still decent and take care of these flashing issues and roof issues while we can. So if the mayor and council is okay with that, there's a lot more detail in the memo, obviously. I'd like a nod ahead tonight so I can move forward, and while the weather's good, so I can keep moving forward. And at the end of the month, you can formally approve the consent agenda and the additional cost. Part of this has to do also with the future bond financing, which is an issue I know the finance director has not been here yet to talk about, but she's going to in the near future. So the idea is to get some of these projects going and in there that we know we're going to, or hopefully, put in a future bond issue and pay for it at a later date. I know it's a lot of information right offhand, but so I put some photos in there of the roof so you understood what we were talking about. And like I said, there's 3 distinct roofs down there, and these are the 2 larger ones. We didn't realize the roofs were in such bad shape, but we're pretty convinced, or I'm convinced, that storm in January really did a lot more damage than had been up there before. So hence the reason we're trying to keep this project moving forward.
So again, Eric, so you're worried about, in other words, the time frame that it would take to go ahead and rebid it and do all of that. We're too deep into winter then, and then we have the
Well,
issues
right.
that we didn't expect.
Exactly. If we have to rebid it, what we have to do is budget the money and then bid it out over the winter and spring, and then hopefully have them back in by I'd say, in the next fiscal year, which would be after July 1. I'm just trying to take care of the issues now while we think we can, while the weather still holds out.
Okay.
I'm good with this now.
Okay.
All right?
So it'll come back to you at your regular meeting for actual approval at the end of the month?
Yes, I'll have a consent agenda form. I put a draft of it in here so you can see what it looked like. The consent agenda form is a form that we used for the large purchases over $25,000. But I'll have a number of department heads will sign off on that, including Valerie and finance director.
Mr. Musk.
Eric, I support this. This makes absolute sense, good sense to me. But let me ask you this one question.
Sure.
Recent work that was done on the roof,
Yes.
I gather that the old roof was not taken off, but that at least the flat parts are, that the new roof or new roofing, whatever,
Yes.
was put on top of the old roofing.
On part of it. Half the roof was actually removed. The section that we worked on, is part of that, half of that roof is the existing roof that was built early 1900s. And part of the roof was when the city bought the building and renovated it 25 years ago. And it has, so we wanted to remove that to make sure we understood how those roofs were built and make sure there was no issues. There weren't any. The older part of the roof we left on because we were afraid it would do more harm than good. And this type of roofing system can go over it. The system we're talking about doing here on the other roofs will go over the existing roofs. The
Okay.
old flashing will come off, but the existing roofing will remain.
Okay, well, that's what I want to ask you.
Sure.
If you put the new roof on, over the old roof,
Yes.
does that create any stress problems on the walls
No.
for the future?
No. This type of roofing is, I mean, any type of roofing is gonna have weight to it. But both those roofs are pretty solid. That's not, the weight issue is not gonna be an issue or on the walls, no.
Okay.
Right. And this is not uncommon what we're doing. Putting a roof over another roof is not uncommon at all.
And the new roof's going to be guaranteed
20 years. Yes. That's from, both these roof systems, or all these roof systems are a Firestone system. Firestone's been around 100 years. Their reps will come in, they'll take core samples, they'll test everything, and they're the ones that provide the warranty that's for 20 years. Yep.
Okay, well, we'd be foolish not to save that money, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
All right, the 2016 tractor-drawn aerial moved to Eastern Boulevard. Chief?
Afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Council. Two agenda items this evening, first of which I'd like to introduce President Captain McCoy of the Pioneer Hook and Ladder Company. He's been a volunteer here in the city of Hagerstown for 38 years and has been instrumental in helping us get to the point where we are. I would be remiss if I didn't point out to not only Mayor and Council, but the public, how emotional an issue this is for the Hagerstown Fire Department. This is a building and a facility that has served the citizens of Hagerstown since 1915. You won't speak to a single career or volunteer firefighter that doesn't have strong ties to this facility. I think the business argument is easy. I think the emotional arguments are a little tougher, and that's why we're here this evening. I inadvertently left out the PowerPoint you have in front of you because I thought we were going to be in room 407 today. That's not me paying attention to the agenda close enough. But what I would ask you to do is let me run through 5 slides for you that you have in front of you in color that I think make a little more sense. So if I get the right clicker here. The summary of the need to move Truck 1, we accepted delivery of a brand-new 100-foot tractor-drawn aerial in July of last year, put it in service, and found that there was only inches of clearance in the existing facility, not to mention the fact that what we've known forever and ever is running the wrong way up Franklin Street, control the intersection, backing in, all those things. So size, access, deployment coverage have always been a struggle for this truck company. The efficiency and effectiveness of response, a picture's worth 1,000 words. I'll show you a few pictures in a moment. And something that the previous administration's heard from me several times is our ability to assemble 4 firefighters together. This certainly is one of the benefits of moving this truck. Economy of scales, facilities, consolidation, I've heard loud and clear since I've been here in 17 months that financials are tight, and we have to find new ways, new strategies to consolidate and make things work even better. Now, there was some misinformation out there for many years that this was a volunteer-owned facility. We've done a lot of homework to get to the point in time we are this evening, and I can tell you with certainty, including the review of both the Pioneer Hook and Ladder's attorney and the city attorney, Mark Boyer, that this is a city-owned facility. We also had a joint study group working for about 120 days that produced the numbers that we'll show you here in a minute for facility renovations. So I like this map that Rodney Tissue provided me. In 1914, when that station was built, that's what the city of Hagerstown looked like, the rectangle. And largely, it was at a time for the fire department when station location was determined on the capacity of a team of horses to run 8 blocks. And that's how we ended up with all the downtown facilities we did. The irregular city corporate boundaries continue to create a challenging service delivery problem for not only fire, but for police and other public safety agencies. This is our local alarm map today, 5 engines, each one represented by a different color. If, appears this is not gonna show the laser pointer, but anyhow, just about, you know where 2123 West Franklin Street is, that's where truck 1 is. More importantly, the second ladder truck in Washington Square was only 6 blocks apart in a city that's 6 miles long on one axis, 4 miles long on the other. So the number one reason to properly locate any fire department asset is good north-south and good east-west coverage. And this move certainly enhances that. So there's the then and now version of what I just shared with you. I'll respect your time and move quickly. Here's the most important slide in the deck. The ISO was in 2015 and rated the city as they typically do. So the graphic on the left shows a 2.5 mile coverage area based on truck 1 moving to the location I'm recommending tonight. The blue, the slide on the right, reflects the coverage area 2.5 miles from Station 4 in the West End, where our second aerial device is. If you overlaid those, which I did not do, you would see there's a reasonable overlap in the center, but more than 90% of the existing municipal boundary is appropriately covered. That is not the case with the 2 trucks 6 blocks apart. Here's our unit responses. I draw your attention to truck 1, truck 4. We're talking about truck 1. Each of the last 3 years, that's the number of runs they took in. Truck 4 is a little skewed. That number on the right, you may remember, was at a time in 2013 when we had no truck 4. And actually, the second item on the agenda tonight is directly related to that, purchase the used ladder, so that we had a ready reserve ladder. I think one of the consequences of this move will be that those unit number responses between truck 1 and truck 4 will balance. Without question, truck 4 is gonna get busier and will be the first arriving truck downtown. That's a turn from tradition. You know, for some folks, that's a really difficult thing to accept. As your fire chief, I'm saying that this is absolutely best for the citizens. And that's it. I think the rest of the information was consolidated in the memo. I'm certainly happy to entertain any questions. And I once again want to acknowledge the cooperation we've had out of the Pioneer Volunteers. Directly related to their efforts there, the Independent Juniors, we're moving to another city-owned station that the Independent Juniors occupies. They've received them with open arms. We're talking about some things that we might be able to do there to better share space and possibly looking at ways to improve that facility moving forward to house 2 companies rather than 1 company. Certainly we have the bay storage, we have the bunk storage, we have kitchen, we have all those things there. And I would open up this conversation to any questions Mayor and Council may have.
Can you hear from Captain McCoy?
Absolutely.
Of course, this station has a lot of memories. My father worked at this station for 34 years, his entire career with the city of Hagerstown. I've been a volunteer for 38 years, 36 years out of this station. Of course, we don't want to see the station move. However, times are changing. Taking the ladder truck on probably more than half the calls up the street the wrong way is dangerous. And as much as we don't want, it would probably serve the citizens with the response that we do better on Eastern Boulevard. The access is in and out's a lot easier. The station's larger. You're not hitting sides of the walls backing in. So it's tough, and I mean, it's more personal for me than it probably is any member down there.
Right.
So I went down there as a child, and I grew up with my father there.
Great hiding place for police officers. Get out of the cold.
Don't know anything about that.
I mean, not that that ever happened, but.
No.
Never. Yeah. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I do. And, you know, I have to admit that the move for the truck out there is good, especially when it comes to when the point in time, it comes when a professional court is extended over the Antietam Creek, and it'll be a better response time to areas such as Meredith and that undeveloped property out there, so. Senator, or Mr. Munson, sorry.
First, thank you for all the service you've given the citizens of the city of Hagerstown.
Yes, sir.
You and your family.
Thank you.
That's one of the things that makes Hagerstown such a better place. But Chief, we're not so worried about horses anymore. We're paying $1 million a truck, and it sounds like this plan has some built-in efficiencies and will serve the citizens well, and I really support what you do here.
Thank you, sir.
What your proposal is.
Yeah, there are just some common sense things when, even as recently as the 1960s, when we bought fire apparatus, they had hoods that you could raise in that facility to check oil, coolant, all that. Now you have to tilt a cab.
Yeah.
There's no capacity to do that. There's no capacity to work on anything. You have to take it somewhere else.
Right.
And of course, we have a long front apron out at the new facility, and as the mayor articulated, it is better response coverage.
Anybody else? Everybody okay with this move? Krista? Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The second agenda
You're
item
gonna
is.
stay there, yeah?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Truck 11, emergency maintenance repairs.
So truck 11 is the Ready Reserve aerial ladder, 1994 purchase from New Jersey just several years ago. It was bought for a prayer. That's good news, but knew that at some point it's going to require some attention. So this year, there were several items that failed aerial ladder inspection. That's a third-party inspection. And also, there's a few running gear issues. So for those of you that are new to council in this administration, we had planned originally to replace this truck in FY19, probably for $1.5 million. I believe, and when this is budgeted funds, that if we invest the $22,000 that we're asking for now, we can defer that pending any catastrophic failure for 3 to 5 years. And that's my goal as your chief sitting here tonight. This is a single source bid. We did a lot of homework here evaluating all 3 trucks, which one's the best. This is the oldest of the 3 trucks that are available for potential rehab by 3 years. But it's also more robust, less wear and tear on it, and the reason it is where it is to be evaluated is it was the original equipment manufacturer, although a different name now. So those people know the bones of that truck, and we actually invested about $600 to let them disassemble key components at their facility to make sure we had an accurate bid. I do not anticipate being back here with my hand out on this project unless we find something they couldn't find in a day's worth of disassembly.
Keep in mind, this vehicle was actually purchased as a reserve. I mean, it wasn't purchased as a.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, I fully support this.
And it just, as a coincidence, it doesn't fit in the station we were just talking about. It's never fit. It's too tall. So another reason for the move. But appreciate council's support. If we can have it, we'd like to get that working without a reserve ladder at this moment in time. So we want to get moving with this.
Anybody else?
Sounds great, Mayor, and it's budgeted funds, so it's there.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
All right, Michelle, you're up. 2015 A and B bond proceeds.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So Raina and I are here this evening to talk about bonds. In April of 2015, we did the last issue of a governmental obligation bond for the city of Hagerstown. At the time that we issued that bond, many of you will remember, we did both a tax exempt and a taxable series. We are now in December 2016, and one of the criteria and requirements of tax exempt bonds are that we have certain time periods that we have to spend the money. And I take that very seriously. Raina takes that very seriously. We've been monitoring the projects. And the good news is that several of the projects that we had originally funded with bonds came in under budget, and or some have been deferred. So we're here this evening because we're part of the cycle midway through, and we have to get the rest of the money spent timely or have other consequences. So the reason that I'm here tonight, and Raina is here, is to talk about these projects. On the first page of the memo, the projects that we have, and what I did, there's little abbreviations in front of the project, represents the fund that each project is under. So the majority of the funds that we have unspent monies in, 3 are from the general fund. One is major signal intersection upgrades, and that project came in under budget, which is great. We have $2,033.11 left. Storm drain system upgrades, again, that was a project that came in under budget, so we have a little bit of money left there. The one that is on the taxable series is we had issued some money for the MELP project. So we have currently we have some unspent monies there. The rest of these, with the exception of the pump station for wastewater treatment facility, are just projects that are coming in under budget. The wastewater treatment one, they literally have another project that needs a little bit more funding, so we're actually swapping it for one wastewater project for another. Typically, at this point, we would have come before council probably a couple months ago and sat as a group to define priority projects and where we wanted to best spend the money. And again, keeping the timing is really not on our side. The, I guess, unusual circumstances that I have this evening is that many of the projects that I'm coming before you recommending that we utilize this money for are projects that have previously been approved by council. They are projects that are already finished for the most part, and projects that we have already spent funds on. So if we decide that these are not projects to utilize the rest of this bond financing for, the quandary is going to be then we need to identify funding sources in order to offset and reimburse for those projects. First and foremost, City Park Lake Design, $74,000. And again, that project is completed. We paid and started that project back, I think the first invoice was paid March of 2016. Prospect Street Wall, this was an emergency type of repair. It was unforeseen. It actually is the result of a citizen accident, and there was a lot more damage. And again, this project is already well underway and almost finished. Fairgrounds Grandstand improvement, the $154,000 is actually the money that we spent in the electrical upgrades in the new fit/recreation center. Wastewater plant equipment, that's the one that I mentioned previously where we just need to move it from one project within wastewater to another. And then I'm going to skip one. Elizabeth Hager Center building roof. So originally, whenever we issued this bond, we had money in property management. We were going to do windows in another building. In the meantime, the roof at the Elizabeth Hager Center needed some work. So that work has already been blessed, has already been started, so I'm asking that we just move the monies here to help pay for that.
So you're not doing a Roslyn building windows,
No, not at this time.
and you're moving that money over to take care of the roof.
Part of it's going to be, correct, part of it's for the roof, and then part is elsewhere. So the one that we skipped over, Centergrove plant improvements. At the wastewater treatment facility, we have a contract with a company named Centergrove. And whenever we recently did the contract agreement with them, we as a body agreed that over a 5-year period, we would do $1 million in improvements there for 5 years. We spent the first $1 million in sludge storage. And then that million was gone, and back in the spring, Mike and his group came before this body as part of a consent agenda to start the second $1 million. So they're already started and underway. We're just looking to move the monies there. Again, that was a taxable series. The Center Grow plant and the work that they're doing there is also taxable. And of all the projects, the wording in the ordinance, if this is the path forwards, will be a little different for that specific project. At this time, the city is not yet finished with its portion of the project that we started with the MELP, and we're currently waiting on MDE. So as soon as that is finished, whatever balance would remain that we have in this bond, I'm recommending that we go ahead and move it towards the reimbursement of what we've already been spending down at the wastewater treatment plant. In order to do all of this, we need to do ordinance followed by a resolution. So I guess right now, I'm open to questions specifically with these projects or anything, because bonds are not always the easiest thing to understand. And having two series at the same time and trying to reprogram and keep both spent and keeping on track so that it keeps us where we need to be.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
The first is, you said that the MELP
Yes.
bond was taxable,
Yes,
and the Senegro is taxable as well.
correct.
But you said that the wording would need to be changed.
So for all the other projects, we're moving 100% from a project to a project. When we word the ordinance from the MELP to Senegro, we'll have to include wording that and it'll be legal language, but in the first part, that we would leave the 651 right now where it is for the MELP until the city is finished with its portion of that
Okay.
project. And then once that is done and established, we'd go ahead and move the monies. And by
So it could be
wording
less
it,
than
it that way, it allows us to do both of the series at the same time so that we don't have to come back and do a separate ordinance and resolution for the taxable series at a later date.
Okay. The second question is, as it applies to the bond proceeds, are these bond proceeds eligible for acquisition purposes?
It would depend. So the taxable or the tax exempt?
The taxable,
Taxable, yes, more than likely.
okay.
Tax exempt, very questionable, and then that would
Tax
be-
exempts, no, right?
Tax exempt, probably no.
But a small portion of that 651, if it were desirable, could be used for acquisition.
Yes. Taxable to taxable would be eligible.
What are you getting at?
I'm getting at a conversation for a specific piece of property that we have not discussed in public, but that we have some portion of funding for, and there was an apparent interest to acquire that property, that I would like to entertain some discussion on seeing if we could carve that small portion out that we need to complete that process.
I got you.
And one of the things that I would mention is that we currently anticipate coming back in January. So this is to get the majority of the projects that are already shovel-ready or things that we've already done. But I'm coming back, and Raina's coming back in January to start the discussion of our 2017 future bond issue. And in looking at those projects, again, some of them we've already approved and have purchase orders in place for. And in looking at those projects, we're gonna again be looking at a tax exempt and a taxable series. So if maybe giving us another month to continue conversations on the other, maybe that's something we look at adding to our 2017, because that's definitely something that I would say we could do at that time.
I think part of the difficulty that I have with that deferral, as specific as it applies to this funding transfer, is, and maybe it was just in my mind, envisioning that the 651, and I guess it is or it isn't, was largely a sort of general fund, sort of allotted bond series, and what we're doing is we're transferring that to the utility fund capital program. And so, I don't know, me as one person, I would try and fight a little for just a little of that to stay and accomplish that other task while we have partnering funding to do it. That's just my 2 cents.
And I see where, Councilman, where you're going with that. I mean, that does make sense, except that I will just state that it was, even though it was issued through general fund, which I'm not sure exactly why it was done that way, it could have been done through the utility
Oh, yeah.
because of, yeah. So it's a
I get
little
that
like-
argument.
So if we move these projects, if we move the funding out of the general fund and over to wastewater will then, from the point that we move it over, would pick up all the principal repayments and all the interest payments. I was just trying to think through.
I understand
Yeah.
that as well.
It's a questionable project, and this way, we know these projects
Okay.
are definitive, so at this point, once we would reprogram it, we wouldn't be looking at a year or two down the road with another 50 to 100,000
You're trying to
sitting.
limit your obligation of debt as it applies to the general fund.
Exactly.
Right, and we're trying to.
Replace
And coming
I
upon.
understand that.
when the-
Yeah, and
when the
trying to
budget,
wrap
that
up
is a goal.
the
understand what
we
you're
want to
doing.
wrap up the series.
I'm just fighting for a little bit of it in the process.
I already had a
And then I feel bad because
Kristen, I
Mike's
already had a
busted his hump
conversation
on the
with
belt.
Michelle about fighting for a
I
little
feel like
bit
I'm
as well.
robbing him on something that he worked his tail off to earn, but that's, whatever.
I've already had
That's
that
fine.
conversation with her, trying to do the same thing.
Whatever.
so. She talked me out of it.
Yes. But it is a
Alright.
good question, and it's definitely something that we've already thought about. It was actually already brought forward yesterday.
I got
And
you.
I appreciate everything that's going on here, and I think that staff has thought about it, and as the mayor says, we can start picking it apart, I think.
I mean, I think it
we
limits
stick with
our
staff
need for
recommendations.
future bond issue, and so, I mean, I could think of probably 5 or 6 different things we could do, but, this makes sense.
Yeah,
Right
this
now,
makes sense.
and that gives us a little bit more time
Right.
for next year's bond issue to come
Yeah.
up with a plan, so
Right.
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Mike's smiling, he's happy.
Of course.
Yeah, and I would end up supporting Kristen's position with the new bond issues we have.
Yeah, we need to talk about that, because that's something I don't know about, apparently.
No, I understand.
You know, I hate that not knowing things. so. All right, so we're good with this then?
So what's on here too, I just, to point out, is the potential calendar schedule of events. So some of the next steps that have to happen.
Correct.
Have been outlined here.
So at this point, we would need a special session. And so Rena would work to prepare the documents for next week for the motion and the introduction of the ordinance for you to review. And then at the end of December 20th, would be the adoption of that bond ordinance. And then later, our bond counsel has asked that we wait until the ordinance becomes effective before we come back with a resolution. So we would look to be coming back with a resolution January 24th, if this schedule is okay and we do the special session.
Sounds good. Everybody good?
Only question I have, and this is, and I apologize just for being
No,
as when
please.
I said the new kids on the block. These obviously were things that came in under budget, as you said. What happens to that money if it's not reallocated or reprogrammed? It's just lost, basically?
No, actually, because of the way that this bond works, the money is already in our bank account, and we are obligated that when we initially sat down and we said, we need $100,000 for this project, we have to spend it all there, and we only have a certain time frame in which to do it. If we don't meet those time standards, we get in, we face consequences.
Maybe the question is, can we give it back? In some cases you can, in some cases there's
Some-
penalties to do it because
Right.
these entities have.
And we've done that
basically-
before.
Well, it's not
We've
necessarily giving it
given
back,
bond
but
money
what
back,
you
but
can
it
put it
hasn't
into
been
as far as
The
this way.
principle.
other places you can
Yeah.
steer some of it to, because
Right.
from the outside looking at it, I'm like, all right, we got $1 million sitting here.
Right.
You know, the chief just talked about buying a fire truck for 25 grand, and we have all these other issues, it's like, Again, I know there's a disconnect here, and I apologize for,
No, no, no,
catch
no,
up here, but-
these are good questions. I think the way that the tax, and I would have to go back and read the legal documents. I think the time we did this 2015 bond series, we could pay back, but there's a certain window of time, and I think it's a longer term period of like 10 years. We can't hold the money for 10 years and wait to repay it. That's against the guidelines.
Yeah.
And then there was some language for other prepayment. The only other thing that I would add, so with the tax exempt money, the projects and the things that are eligible are very specific and defined. And so as your finance director and poor Chief Laura, I've already had that conversation with him. So his truck that is in Lancaster, I think, is being refurbished. So a refurbishment is not
Right.
an eligible project for this type of bond financing.
It's not capital investment.
And the refurbishment money that he talked about earlier for the ladder truck was included in our fiscal year 17. So he has the monies and the funding there to do it.
the, 100,000 for the Prospect Street wall, you said was a result of an accident,
Yes,
like an automobile accident of some sort?
Yeah.
or-
yes. And we did receive some insurance back. That is only a small portion. So when we come back in January, we will have another dollar amount that also has to be funded out of the 2017 bond.
Do we have any recourse for the differences for the insurance amount to this 100 grand that we're paying out?
And well, and again, it's going to be larger than 100,000. I think the project in total was close to $300,000. The insurance reimbursement was 25.
I think the answer is, Paul, that and tell me if I'm wrong, that we were reimbursed for the damage that was actually done, but in looking at that wall, it was in.
There's some structural
such-
issues that need to be taken
in
care of.
Such structural bad shape that. it
Prior
was-
to the accident?
Yeah, that the decision was made, that was a project that needed to be done.
Correct.
Thank you.
Great questions, though.
Anything else from Michelle? All right.
I'll say this, thank you for coming up with this process. I'm sure this required some work and some thought, considering the timeframes that we're working in. So thank you for coming up in a way that is going to continue to benefit the citizens of Hagerstown.
Certainly.
Anybody else?
I'm going to stay here. as my executive.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, city administrators' comments.
Nothing additional, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, you can just hang out.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Kelp, anything from you? Comments? Mr. O'Shea?
Just one, I know we're a little late getting back here from the delegation. We got sidetracked a little bit from a citizen who has a rehabilitation housing in the city that I think wanted to bend our ear on the issue about how much we need those here. So,
Mr. Cordovan?
I mean, like Chris said, I apologize for the tardiness here this afternoon. Two citizen comments that came up this week, just random discussions that I wanted to bring forth. I know one was an issue before, back when we had our forum at the library with the machine down there snagging people's credit cards. I think it happened to you, didn't it? Not to bring it, but it's happened to two other people I know of in the last week. So anyways, I received an email concerned about it, so I don't know what direction I need to steer that towards, but apparently the machine
At
is
the
still.
library?
Correct.
I guess maybe the county, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We could talk to Mary, or
Yeah.
I can get an email
Okay.
to her and let her know that there's been some reports.
County
on
library,
that.
it's in the
Yeah.
city of Hagerstown, people are attending church in
Yeah.
Hagerstown, and that's where it happened, so.
Their ATM machine, is that what you're saying?
No, the parking machine outside.
Oh, the parking machine, I'm
Park there.
sorry, okay.
I don't know who governs the lot per se, if it's the county or the.
Library, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
yeah, that's the issue, is nobody's there, and you're there
Yeah.
like 9 o'clock at night, it's eating your credit card, the gate won't go up, and you're
Right.
kind of just stuck.
That's a will, yeah.
I'll
There's
give
no getting out.
Mary a heads up.
There's the curb,
Councilman. Yeah.
There's the curb and there's.
Well, and then
There's
no
the
car.
breaking, there's things that we would like to firm up.
Yeah, we'll have, let Mary check that out.
I will, I'll send her an email.
Mr. Metzger?
It's good being back.
Welcome back.
And I feel like the new kid on the block now. I watch the meetings on TV, and I commend everybody for everything. But the one thing I want to mention, and I sort of alluded to it today, Mayor, at the meeting, was when I heard everybody's thoughts for what was on their mind for the next 4 years. I'd say that, you know, the things that are always talked about every single election are always the same, because they are clearly the most important things that we do, and that is public safety. Public safety and taxes are always the number 1 and 2 things, so you would expect that that would have been what was discussed, and it was, and appropriately so. However, you know, Don, when we started 4 years ago, people talked about what we needed to have accomplished at the end was the demolition of Melt.
Right.
I think, Kristen, you would agree that that was like,
Prime-
that
prime
first meeting, that was the prime issues. The thing that really hasn't been discussed publicly very much, and I don't think was ever one question asked at the forums that we had, was what are you doing with Edgemont? And I think really when this administration is done, what I would like to think we will be remembered for decades down the road as being the administration that guaranteed there would be a second source of water for our community. We keep seeing spills on the Potomac, and we continue seeing climate change and droughts. And now, for the first time, we find out that West Virginia is going to start taking their aspect of the Potomac River, and that Maryland no longer appears to be the sole one who's going to have control over that river. So I think when this administration is done, I would like to think that's, you know, we talk all the time about Mr. Wilson and his thought process back in the 20s of building that water plant out there, and I think that that's what we're going to need to do here. The expense is a lot, but it's almost as expensive to shut it down as it is to keep it going. And the other reason I bring it up is God knows what's going on with our federal government, but there is one thing that seems to have been discussed that everybody sort of likes, and our congressman has been on it from the beginning, and that's infrastructure. And the last time we had a major federal infrastructure bill, we may recall that one of the things that was necessary was to be shovel-ready. And in anticipation that one of these days the new president that's coming in is going to actually jump on some infrastructure bills, it would be nice to see how ready we can be if that becomes our major infrastructure issue to go to John Delaney and seek assistance for. So that's my little 2 cents that I didn't get to put in last week.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Mr. Munson?
I'd like to say I concur with that. This is for the future of our city, and probably for the county. This is going to be a big issue. It's a costly issue, and it's something that we're going to have to work out, and hopefully infrastructure funds will help us. I'd like to welcome Lou back, landslide Lou, and just say that I know that, Lou, I know that you went through a very difficult time. Not only in your personal life, but also with this election. And I think it's god-awful that candidates should have to wait for almost a month until they know the results of an election. It's just ridiculous. Other states do it better in that regard, and Maryland really ought to be looking at that. And I'm sure that the penny is in a lot of pain, having lost the election. Having been there myself, I know the kind of pain you go through. And I wish her well. I'm sure the whole council wishes her well, and thank her for the many good things that she did while she was serving on city council. That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Real quick, if you didn't get to the tree lighting and on Friday night over at City Park, you missed an amazing time. A huge thank you to Hagerstown Heating and Cooling, who supplied the chocolate and the cookies and sponsored the event. We appreciate that. And I attended the Convention and Visitors Bureau's yearly meeting this morning. Once again, tourism is leading economic development in our county, and hopefully it will continue to do so. We have some great things on the horizon that looks like it's going to bring a lot of people. And I think since we have this wonderful cultural trail, we need to bring the CVB on board to try to find ways to bring people there. So let's have a discussion with them at some point in time about what they might be able to help us with, to put feet on the path as opposed to feet on the street. So, all right, yes, Chris.
Just wanted to thank the museum. I was at the tree lighting, but, certainly wasn't down.
Oh, you didn't come down to where I was at?
No.
Okay, all right.
We
buddy.
went over to the tent and, we need a bigger tent. But I just wanted to thank the museum because they definitely took on a lot of overflow and had a ton of people in there as well, so it was a good balance, but.
Auxiliary police say it is
in
the
relief.
biggest crowd that they've ever remembered.
I was the biggest crowd. I was amazed.
I will tell you, it was.
But the museum's doors.
I
were
didn't
open.
get any hot chocolate, so that just tells you how long the line was, okay?
I was there too. Better daughter.
Yeah, it was just a
And-
matter of so many people and so difficult to
Yeah.
park, we didn't get in to see
Everybody knew where I was. I was freezing up on the stage.
But
So
it was very impressive. Hopefully New Year's Eve is going to become that
so the
way.
donut drop is right, yes. Anything else?
And staff will be assessing, the tent and any of the things that we did new this year that we might want to tweak a little bit and have a little bit better movement or so. But all in all, staff did a great job as well, as
Yep.
usual, and it was a good time.
It was. All right,
Mayor,
with,
This is like, I watched you on TV and I was like really impressed. I was surprised you didn't have a comment that I wasn't here. And that's why you're on time, but this is a meeting, you're like way ahead, good job.
let me get it done. I need to get a motion to go in executive session to consult with counsel and obtain legal advice.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're in executive session. Thank you all for attending.